If you saw my Facebook post last night, or you sang in the first service, you know where I'm going to start. General Omar Bradley was taking a commercial flight, and he was dressed in his civvies. And there was a private who didn't know who he was that was seated next to him. And so the private was making conversation, and he asked the general what he did. The general sat up straight and said, "I'm a 5-star general, and I work at the Pentagon." The private said, "Gee, that's a pretty important job. I hope you don't blow it." That's kind of the pressure that pastors feel on Easter Sunday. Easter is an exciting time. It's a time of celebrating the resurrection. It's a time of music, pageantry, and ritual. When I grew up in Michigan, I had a ritual that I performed every year. When winter came to stay, the city would flood the city parks with water, and they would become ice rinks for the whole winter. And so every year I would dig out my skates, I would make my way to one of these parks. This was the beginning of my yearly ritual. I'd put on my skates and make my way out on the ice. I would stand there with my ankles bent, the blade in the edge of my shoe was resting on the ice. I would try and straighten up to stand on the blades, and I would try and skate. But it was no use. It was at that point every year that I discovered what I already knew, that I was probably the only kid in Michigan who couldn't ice skate. Barbara and I were the only 2 kids. I was the only boy. And so my ritual was complete for another year. On that first Easter Sunday morning, as the women approached the tomb, they asked themselves, who will roll away the stone? It was too heavy for them to do, and they didn't know who else might help them. And yet, they went anyway. They are on a mission to do that which they think they are unable to do, and yet they go. What draws them to the tomb in spite of the fact that they believe they will be unable to perform the task that they want? There's something about Easter that draws us back. There's something about Easter that fills us with hope, with new possibilities. We come today to hear the music of heaven. We come today to glide in God's Spirit. For many, this is a weekly ritual. For some, like mine was, once a year. For most, it's somewhere in between. Where we come. Pastor Jim Moore tells about an experience he had in the Garden Tomb in Jerusalem some years ago. He said, "I was there with the Holy Land Tour group. We came one morning to the Garden Tomb, the place where the resurrection happened. He said, I can't find the words to express the thrill of that experience, the exhilaration of being in that sacred place. He said, we walked around that beautiful garden. We went inside the empty tomb. We touched the massive stone that had been rolled away from the grave. We stood together in that holy place and celebrated Holy Communion. We prayed there for loved ones, and we sang the hymn, Christ the Lord is risen today. He said it was an incredible moment, a powerfully moving spiritual moment for me. Then he said, I noticed a man sitting on a bench nearby. He'd been watching us. And so I walked over and sat next to him, and he began to talk to me. He said, I just love this place. It's so serene and quiet here. I come here 3 or 4 times a week. Well, Jim was very impressed and said, you must be a very devoted Christian. He said, oh no, I'm not a Christian at all. I just come here because it's pretty. That's how it is with the story of Jesus often. The spiritual is often accompanied by a temptation. The temptation is to pick up the enjoyable, the easy, and to ignore or discard the rest. program because it's pretty. Sometimes the temptation is to try and figure it all out, to make sense of it. Peter Berger reflected in the loss we risk when we try and turn everything over to science to make everything a formula. He said, granted, as I think we must, that modern science has given us new and often penetrating insights into reality. Is it not possible that in that process some very precious things have been lost? I'm thinking of truths that may have been lost in the process. Our ancestors didn't know about particle physics, but they spoke with angels. Could it be that we lost the truth when our conversation with angels came to a stop? Are we? Can we be so certain that the truths of modern physics necessarily imply the untruth of angels? These are Easter questions. As Victor Shepard points out, Jesus wanted followers, not detectives. In an Easter sermon several years back, our former district superintendent, Ted Burtz, made a confession. He said, I was not very good at physics as a student in high school. He said, my teachers thought I solved problems like an old cartoon. The cartoon shows a thoughtful scientist in a white lab coat standing before a large blackboard filled with scientific figures and formulas. The scientist has written a bracket, and inside the bracket, he wrote the phrase, "Here a miracle happens," followed by an equal sign and the answer. Then Ted says, that's Easter. Here a miracle happens. The Christian scriptures are notoriously insistent that after all the preparation of human history with God, we get to a point, Easter, and then in brackets, here a miracle happens. The equal sign is followed by the affirmations that gird our lives. God loves us. God knows us. God takes care of us. God forgives us. God's grace surrounds us. Those conclusions are very satisfying, he said, but for us rational people, the way to the conclusion can be as irritating as here a miracle happens to a science teacher. The church makes that irrational even more severe in its insistence that the miracle happens to us as well. We are made new. We are part of the new creation. We are risen. It is Easter. Here a miracle happens. Christ is risen. If you want to see a wonderful picture, go through your National Geographics, go back to 1996, look in the August edition, and turn to page 190. It's a wonderful picture. Photographer for National Geographic, Tomas Tomuski, was in Mexico. He saw a little girl selling an armadillo for 30 pesos in a Yucatan doorway. And that's the picture you see. Little girl in a doorway holding an armadillo by the tail. She was selling it for 30 pesos. He said, I knew if I didn't buy it, its only future was his soup. So he paid her the 30 pesos and he drove off to set the creature free. He said, as I walked into the jungle, it looked back at me like it could not believe its luck. Later that night, Tomas called back to Warsaw to his daughter, Marina, who was celebrating her 17th birthday. He said to her, your present is one happy armadillo. That's a picture of Easter. We thought we were goners. We were set free. We didn't know what to do. Someone bought us. Resurrection power comes to us in many ways. Sometimes it rescues us when we are in serious trouble. In times of loss, grief, and despair, the resurrected Christ stays with us until we can find new life in a new way. Incredibly, sometimes God uses us to bring new life and hope to others. The resurrected Christ does not offer us 3 wishes or a get-out-of-jail-free card. That's not how it works. Instead, Jesus offers us the strength to live when we cannot find the power ourselves. Jesus walks with us. He offers us hope that God indeed is with us. If I were in Michigan, I'd probably still pull out my skates every year. Today, we gather here together, and it is a new day. Let's look together for the resurrected Christ and the new life He has for us. For the struggles that seem so hard, know that He walks with you. For the discouragement you might feel, know that there is hope. Here a miracle happens. Let us shine that great light of God's love and resurrection to our world and to those around us.